there, and welcome to another episode of The Bible. Wait, what? Yes, this is the podcast that unravels the mysteries of the Bible's most perplexing, puzzling, and thought-provoking passages. My name is Rohan, and each session I'm joined by a member of our team at C3 Church Camden, Picton and Thirroul as they quiz me on some of the more complicated, confusing, challenging, and even confronting passages that we read in our weekly Bible reading plan. We understand that reading the Bible can be a challenging and perplexing experience. Many people just don't know where to start, they get confused, and so they give up. Well, that's why this podcast exists, to equip you with the tools and the knowledge to explore the richness and depth of the Bible for yourself. So grab your Bible, take a deep breath, and join us as we explore this week's passages. To learn more about us or to get in touch with us at C3 Church Camden, Picton and Thirroul, visit any of our three locations' websites. That's c3camden.church, c3picton.church and c3thirroul.church. Or you can follow us on Facebook, Instagram and YouTube just by searching for any of our locations' names. So without any further delay, let's dive into today's conversation. Well, hello everyone, wherever you are in the world, because we are being listened to all around the world. Well, I don't know, we are according to Podbean. There's a few listeners in America and Asia and Europe. There's a few there, so welcome wherever you are. I am here, Rohan, sitting down with Phil for Revelation Part 2. Welcome, Phil.
Well, thank you. Welcome.
Yeah. We had some fun in our last episode, unraveling, or maybe we should say creating more ravels.
More confusion.
In the book of Revelation. I'm sitting down, as was with last time, in Phil's lounge room, along with his dog Spencer, who no doubt you got a laugh out of listening to him bark last episode. So you're going to behave yourself today, Spencer? He looked at me then.
Yeah. Well, as I responded to one person, I was saying he's preaching to the canine.
He's doing the dog conversion, preach the gospel to the dogs.
Yeah.
Yep, that's what you were pretty excited about last time. We actually edited out about 2 minutes of barking nonstop. Something happened out the front door that got him excited, so I didn't want our listeners to put up with 2 minutes of barking.
Even though we do it probably most nights.
Yes, that's pretty standard for you, is it? How old is he?
He's 1 year old.
1 year. He's just having his birthday, isn't he? Just had his birthday.
Yeah.
Yeah,
well,
that's right.
Actually, he's 14 months.
14 months, okay. Cool.
So, yeah, he's coming into his own.
Yeah, still a puppy though.
Yeah.
Still behaves like a puppy.
Yeah.
Good.
Still wants to fight and play.
Yeah, play. Yeah. Well, we're gonna tackle Revelation 6 to 10.
Yes.
Today, the next 5 chapters in this story, and then I think Pastor Jeff Baxter's going to do the following episode, next week's episode with me. We haven't recorded that yet, and that's called Beasts in Revelation. We're going to look at all the beasts and dragons and ugly things.
Well, that'll be interesting to know who's who.
Yeah, we'll find out who's who
in the zoo.
Yeah, we'll try to predict. No, we won't. We'll try to avoid too many predictions. That's part of the problem. And then we're going to round it all off talking about the final chapters, the end of all things, and the consummation of God's kingdom. And Jeannie's coming back for that episode as well. So
I was going to say, isn't that we don't need to do the episode because that's what we always talk about.
That's what we normally talk about. That's right.
We always skip these couple of verses or chapters.
We skip about
straight to the end.
Yeah, like we said last time, we go through to about chapter 5 and then we just skip ahead to chapter 20 and ignore everything else in between. But that's what we're going to tackle. Some of these are more challenging stuff. 7 seals, 7 trumpets. I don't think we could do 7 bowls today, but 7 seals, 7 trumpets. I think that's all in today's conversation. All kinds of famines and pestilences.
Yeah.
All the stuff that's easy reading.
Sounds like in part of Australia.
Yeah.
We have,
Well, it's certainly been since 2020. We've just about had, flood, fire and famine, haven't we?
Yeah.
Across the world.
Yeah. So, we'll see what we'll come through.
Yeah.
We'll be victorious at the end.
That's right. Yeah, so we're gonna kick it off with Revelation chapter 6. Maybe before we get into this, I thought we spent a bit of time on the last episode in a preliminary discussion around eschatology and talking about some of those other views that you and I had learned and taught.
Yep.
And so on, and I'm kind of coming at it with a new perspective. So if you're listening to this episode and you haven't listened to last week's episode, I'd suggest pause this, go back, listen to the first one, especially if you've come from what would be regarded as a left behind kind of rapture theology. It would be time to maybe go back, and you'll see that we're coming from a different perspective here. And even since the last episode, I've continued to read and prep for our preaching series that we'll be doing at the same time that this podcast series is actually released. And I found even some fresh ideas and fresh ways of viewing this that I thought maybe we could just talk a little bit about, if that's all right, just at the start, that hopefully as we get further into the story, having this framework will help you.
No, sounds
You up
good.
for that?
Yep.
All right. Yeah, well, I might have referred to this last week. I think I did. That, in some ways the idea was that it wasn't a play that was acted, but the idea would be that there would be an orator who would read this letter, the book of Revelation, the letter of Revelation. He would read it, or she would read it, to the people in these 7 churches. Whether it was one person or multiple people, doesn't really mention that. But that would have been a fairly standard way to do it. And that in that era, when a letter was read, they would field questions as part of that. They would kind of absorb themselves in it. They would tell it as a story, especially for something that is written in this genre that is kind of mystical, mythological almost. So they would kind of act it out, or might even use different voices for different characters and get animated in their actions and so on. And so while it's written that way, as I was sort of reflecting on that more and looking at other resources that I think last time I mentioned, Scott McKnight has a great book, Revelation for the Rest of Us. I've since read another one by N.T. Wright called Revelation for Everyone. I'm yet to read another one as well called Reading Revelation Responsibly. I'll hopefully have that done by the time we have our preaching series. But I've found just those 2 books alone have really helped me to refigure my thinking and see it differently. But this next bit was kind of my own idea.
Yeah.
As I was reflecting, it came out of my own thoughts. And that is, we talked about the book word Revelation being an apocalypse, meaning an unveiling or an open thing. And so I started to see that you can read the book of Revelation as a series of scenes, as if it was a play.
Yeah.
And I'll just pull them up. How I went through one by one, and I kind of wrote down all the different chapters and where they all fit. I'll just pull them up. So imagine that the book of Revelation is like a play. It's going to be performed. So imagine that you go into a theatre and the curtain's closed, and you're just sitting around milling at the start. And then Revelation chapter 1, verses 1 to 9, is what I'd call the prologue. It's John who's going to narrate the play. He's actually, imagine him in front of the curtains, and he's introducing himself to you. I'm not going to go through all the things that happen. I'm just going to give you this prologue, this framework, and then you can use it as you interpret, and we can refer back to it if we need to. So he just spends the first 9 verses or so just speaking to the congregation about what's about to happen, speaking to the crowd. This is about what's going to happen. And then as verse 9 transfers into verse 10, verse 11, the curtain pulls back. John takes a few steps back behind where the curtain was, and you see John is there, but also too now is this figure who we looked at last week, the picture of Jesus who's, arrayed in glory and so on. And at this moment, we see John on the island of Patmos. So he stepped from the front of the stage. He's on the island of Patmos. Now we're seeing the vision of Jesus speaking to John, but also too, we're sort of party to that.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? We're kind of in that. We're on Patmos with him, if you like, and we're watching this conversation. And Jesus, still in this scene as it continues, he directs John to write these 7 letters to the 7 churches that we looked at last week in chapters 2 and 3. And then the curtain closes at the end of chapter 3, and when it reopens, we hear this booming voice saying to John, "Come up here."
Yep.
And the next scene 2, is no longer the island of Patmos. It's now the heavenly throne room, the heavenly temple.
Yep.
And chapters 4 and 5, chapter 4, so what I'm looking at, chapters 4 and 5 are this scene of the heavenly temple.
Yep.
And we see Jesus and the Lamb on the throne and all that sort of stuff. And then the curtain closes again and reopens, and now it's not just the heavenly temple, it is the temple and stuff that's happening on the earth.
Yep.
Okay, all together. And that's chapters 6 to 11, which is a big chunk of what we're going to look at today. So that's going to kind of be scene 3, where Jesus opens up, the Lamb opens up the seals, and he opens up the blows the trumpets and so on, or the trumpets are blown. So we'll look at what all that means. And that's sort of all this kind of like judgment. There's 2 themes there. There's this judgment upon the earth, or sin running its course, I might say. Yep. Bad things happening on the earth because of the result of sin. But also, too, in that we see the promise of protection of God's people. We see visions of people being protected. And then the curtain closes again, opens in chapter 12, which we'll do in the next week's episode, which is, again, I saw a mighty sign in heaven, and it talks about the dragon. And so we're kind of in this fresh scene talking about the beasts and the all the evil spiritual forces behind the scenes. And that's scene 4, the dragon and the beasts kind of doing their worst on the earth. But also there's still this theme of the redemption of all throughout the hard stuff. There's still this theme of redemption of the saints. That's scene 4. Then that's 12, 13, and 14. Scene 5, curtain closes and reopens, and we see a return to the 7 bowls of plagues being poured out, which is very similar to the 7 seals and 7 trumpets. There's a repeat that we're going to see today. And that also speaks, once again, about God's defeat of evil and the redemption of the saints. That theme comes through all the time as evil is continuing to work on the world, on the earth, in the bowls, the trumpets, and the seals. God protects his people. Then the curtain closes and then opens with the penultimate. What is it called? The denouement, the final scene, the coming together, I think it is. Denouement, I think it's called, the word. It's a French word in art. The denouement, which is like the final scene. And that's the Revelation. I skipped one, didn't I? No, I didn't. No. That's it. The Revelation 21 and 22, which is the great new creation, the heavenly Jerusalem coming down and so on. And then right at the end in chapter 22, the whole thing winds back, almost right back to how it started. So it's like, you can imagine that the scene of the heavenly Jerusalem starts to fade away, and then John's back on Patmos again. Yeah. And he's on Patmos, and Jesus is back speaking to John on Patmos, just the way he originally saw him in chapter 1. And then right at the very close, it's like the curtain closes and John walks back in front of the curtain again, and he once again just goes back to addressing the people and saying, "Come, Lord Jesus," and brings it back right back into their everyday lives. And since I've seen it that way, and I know I'm using generalizations, but I think they are a very helpful way to actually unpack. If you know where you're fitting in the scene and what's happening in a particular scene, I think we'll get a lot more out of the book.
Yeah, that sounds puts it in a overall perspective sort of thing. That it's a reminder that you've got the end, and so you don't get bogged down into the nitty gritties.
Yes,
which is what some of us can do.
We can start trying to find this event and match it with, or this thing match it with this event and so on. I think we should see metaphorical meaning in it, but I think we don't need to think that every metaphorical word has one future fulfillment that we're looking for.
So I always remember one person saying that Jewish scholars look at the Torah and all that. There's multiple different layers of meanings. It's like, what's the literal meaning for there then? Yep. What's their, there's always a deeper level, what's a future level, and there's many different ways to, layers to look at.
Well, they say if you've got 2 Jews, you've got 3 opinions.
Yes.
So the Jews don't have a problem. We Christians often want to have everything tied up in a bow. Yeah. But the Jews were much more comfortable with these layered meanings. Yeah. Yeah. And they're often looking for them and quite happy for them to lay side by side. I was actually listening to something N.T. Wright was saying about this, and I thought this is a great way to put it. As you read the book of Revelation, he was saying in his book that, we almost instinctively, because it's written down, we almost instinctively want to see it in a sequential order. But how else can you use written literature, writing, to tell something other than in a sequential order? Now, he used the example of a piece of music, and he's a great, he's a lover of classical music. But he says not uncommon to have, and you think about it, classical music's brilliant for this, not uncommon to have multiple things happening at the same time, different lines of music all playing simultaneously. If you extract each one out, it's telling its own story, but then put it together and it's like a symphony. Yeah. And you can't do that with writing. Like you'd have to, you can write the music out with multiple lines, but if you're going to extract it, you'd have to lay it out sequentially. Yeah. And it loses something by doing that. And so while there's great things in written literature, obviously, but that's one of the limitations. And he was saying that's kind of what John's doing. He's having to unravel into this happened, then this happened, then this happened. But it's quite okay to see them all. They're not necessarily sequential.
Overlapping.
They're overlapping. Some of them might be happening simultaneously at different times. Yep. That's okay. That actually adds to the richness and beauty of the symphony, is what he described it as. And I quite like that idea.
Yeah. And I like I know when I've gone to see musicals, and I'm just thinking of Les Mis, that the basics of their music for all the songs are very similar, but they you can hear the same piece repeated over and over, but it's a totally different part of the story.
Yeah, it's a different story, and they've picked up threads from previous aspects of it. Yeah, and biblical authors do that all the time.
Yeah.
So I think our Western mindset wants to compartmentalize everything, but that's not the way Jews and Eastern thinkers flow, is it? That's very much a Greek mindset. Very much our whole way of life comes from Greek mythology, from the classical era of Greek, really. And certainly even Protestants, the Renaissance was like a returning to ancient Greek classical era. So that's got some beauty to it, but we just need to understand that that's not the way they were thinking. A Jewish mind was much more fluid in the way they thought. It wasn't beginning, middle, end. It was like beginning, middle, beginning again, that kind of thing. And I think that just helps us might just help us to not feel like we have to sequentially unpack everything that happens here. All right, so will we kick it off with chapter 6?
Yeah.
All right.
Sounds good. Okay, so jumping into chapter 6, but I want to preface it by going back to chapter 5 and sort of laying it out.
Come on, do it.
Because it's the beginning of the new episode podcast, that it was like, well...
It's helpful to know what happened in chapter 5.
So in chapter 5, it was... there was this scroll, Jesus, God the Father sitting on the throne, and he had this scroll in the hand, and the angels were asking, who can open these scrolls? And John wept because he was like, I can't find anybody.
Can I pack up the scroll a bit? I don't think I did a good job. We talked about the scroll last time. I don't think I did a good enough job of explaining what the scroll was. I was reflecting back as I was editing. I sort of talked about it being the word of God and so on. It's actually representative of more. It's representative of God's final plan.
Yep.
God's fulfillment of his plan.
True, yeah.
So that's actually what we're seeing. It's like this scroll is the unrolling of this scroll is the awaiting of the final plan that God has for the world to put everything right.
Yep. So Jesus is there, and he's taking the scrolls, and this is where and the reason why he's taking the scrolls, it says that you are worthy to take the scroll and break its seals and open it. For you were killed, and your blood has ransomed people for God from every tribe, language, and people and nation. And you have caused them to become God's kingdom and his priests, and they will reign on the earth. So that's where I was wanting to come from, is like, well, yeah, God, Jesus is the one
who is actually worthy.
Worthy. And because he died.
You were doing remarkably well just to keep reading. You're obviously used to having a dog in the house. You just keep on reading. What's going on over there?
But also having young kids throughout the years, and just like, just keep going. Just ignore it. So that was where I was coming from, is that this is put in his perspective that Jesus is the one that can open the scrolls.
Yeah.
And it's he died for us. From every tribe, every nation, language and people. We're all going to come under God's hand.
Yep, great. That's good.
Yep. And I just love the hymns that are in here, the small hymns.
Yes, there's hymns. We didn't talk about that. There's several hymns, isn't there? Several songs. Worship is a big part of it.
Definitely. That's one of the hymns. The Lamb this is like, you can put this into any day worship, music.
And many of them have been, haven't they?
You sort of look at the old hymns from the 1800s. They use these words as well. Like, the Lamb is worthy, the Lamb who was killed. He is worthy to receive power and riches, wisdom and strength, honor and glory and blessing. To him who sits on the throne forever and ever. Like, those just...
We sang that in the 90s, didn't we? Yeah. Blessing and honor, glory and power. Yeah. Remember that one?
Yes. Yeah. So let's go into chapter 6. And it's, as John watched, the Lamb broke the first of the 7 seals on the scroll. So 7's important completion. So there's complete when he finishes opening the scroll, there'll be completeness.
There'll be That's right, and that's the thing is this. You would assume that's what you're going to think. You're going to think that when the seventh seal on this scroll is opened, that will be the fulfillment. Yeah. But we're going to see that there's a play here. There's a trick. It's like, oh no, it's not fulfilled yet. There's more.
Well, it's the completion of the scroll.
Yes, that's the completion of the scroll, which you think is going to be the fulfillment. It's like you assume, this is reader, as you're listening to this, you're thinking, okay, there's 7 seals. This is what you're supposed to think if you're watching this. Oh, there's 7 seals, and when we open the 7th seal, that'll be the end. God's plan will be complete and it'll be done. And stay tuned, spoiler alert, it's not going to be. There's going to be another development at the end of the 7 seals. And you got to go it's like when you're cresting a mountain. Yeah. You think, I'm just going to get to the top. It's going to be awesome. You get to the top, you look up and there's another mountain you've got to crest. That's kind of like that.
So he opens the first seal. And one of the 4 living beings called on with a voice that sounded like thunder, "Come." I looked up and saw a white horse. Its rider carried a bow and a crown was placed on his head. He rode out to win many battles and gain the victory. Is there significance for these horses? Like there's horses throughout the Revelation.
Yep.
So I'm just wondering, is there any...
These horses here vividly, I mean, these are the famous 4 horsemen of the apocalypse as we refer to them. I think that, I'm not sure why, other than that horses were obviously a battle, at this time they were the primary form of used in battle and arrayed in splendor and so on. So I think it's more a military thing. It's talking about this, the king would ride a horse. So there's an authority that these horsemen carry as they ride out to do destruction. Think of them riding out to face the enemy and so on. But these dudes aren't good. The results they're about to bring aren't good. These aren't from Team Lamb.
No. So this one rode out to win many battles and gain the victory. When the Lamb broke the 2nd seal, he heard a 2nd living being saying, "Come." So another horse appeared, a red one. So we heard the white, got the red. Its rider was given a mighty sword from the authority to remove peace from the earth. And there was war and slaughter everywhere. It's starting to sound horrible.
It is indeed. I mean, this is about the point where people start to lose it with Revelation, because they go, "How can a good God allow this stuff to happen? This is life. Why wouldn't God do something about this?" It seems like it reads like God's ordaining this because it's happening when Jesus opens the scroll.
Yeah,
it's like, oh, open the scroll, here comes the judgment. So we have to wrestle with that. Let that be a bit of a wait, what to you? What's really going on here? Why is it that it seems like God is allowing all these things, famine and war and so on, to happen? We'll come back to it, but let's just wrestle with that and leave the tension there for a minute.
The 3rd seal, when he broke the 3rd seal, the 3rd living being, so these are the living beings that were in front of the throne of God, said, "Come," and I looked and saw a black horse, and its rider was holding a pair of scales in his hand. And the voice from among the 4 living beings said, "A loaf of wheat bread or 3 loaves of barley for a day's pay, and don't waste the olive oil and wine." And I looked at that and went,
what?
I looked at that and went, today's cost of living, that's sort of a big thing at the moment. The cost of living is going up, and it's becoming more expensive.
Yep, so, we'll come back to that. Do you want to do all 4 and then we can just talk about it? Okay, great.
Yeah. When the Lamb broke the 4th seal, I heard the 4th living being saying, "Come," and I looked up and saw a horse whose colour was pale green like a corpse, and death was the name of its rider, who was followed around by the grave. They were given authority over 1/4 of the earth to kill with the sword and famine and disease and wild animals. So that's the four seals, and it's 4 horses of the apocalypse. Should we actually say it's the horses or it's the people on the horses?
Well, I think the statement is it's the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, isn't it? That's the statement that has come across into the common vernacular.
Yeah.
But many people wouldn't even know. They know the statement, but they wouldn't necessarily know this is where it's coming from. This is it.
Yeah. So it's interesting that the first one has battles. The second one is to take away the peace.
Yep.
So war and slaughter, the cost of living, scales to the economy's going belly up, and I'll kill. The 4th one is death.
Death or plague. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Sickness and all those sorts of things. Yeah. Hence why we say, we say war, famine, fire, plague or something like that. That kind of thing is common across bad stuff happening in the world is what they kind of that's the common vernacular for the four horsemen of the apocalypse. Yeah.
And you look out throughout history, that's sort of a common, whether not cycle, but not a cycle in sequential order, but you do have battles and no peace in the place and cost of living going up and death.
So note that these are a combination of natural events that are probably beyond human control and events that obviously are within human control, like war. Clearly is within human control. You mentioned economic. What did you call it? Economic hardship or whatever, right? There's a little bit more than that going on here. This is not just economic hardship. This is actually referring to a specific mistreatment. This is the rich oppressing the poor. Okay.
Yep.
So should we have a look at that?
Yeah, I can see that.
You can see that? Tell me. I was going to ask you where you can see that. Where do you see that? There's a statement that says, verse 6, "And I heard the voice from among the four living creatures say, a loaf of wheat bread or 3 loaves of barley will cost a day's pay, and don't waste the olive oil and wine." It's a bit hard because the word "don't waste" kind of is not the right word there. It's the English translation. Like when I click on my little NLT Bible, it says, "or harm."
Yes. Yeah, I've got that in the bottom
part
of my Bible.
Can you now think, he's stating that bread and loaves of barley, basic food, is going up in price to be a day. It's a day. Basically, it's going to cost you a day's pay to get a loaf of bread. But the cost of olive oil and wine doesn't change. Don't touch the cost of the olive oil and wine.
Yeah.
Why would that be a reference to selfish, elite economic injustice?
Everybody needs bread and the basic wheat. That's our basic necessities.
Yep.
Wine, definitely, you don't have to have wine.
Wine and olive oil are foods of the elite. They're great to have, but they're the foods in this Roman Empire. These are the foods that your average poverty-stricken person does not have.
Yeah.
So can you see how that's actually a statement that when this rider rides out, the result will be that the rich will oppress the poor, that there will be economic unfairness, there will be a lack of economic justice, that the rich will get richer and the poor will get poorer, and that's human nature. And I think that's what's going on in this statement.
Hadn't looked at it a bit like that one.
No, that's a new revelation to me too.
Yeah. Because I was just thinking olive oil is like they would.
It's a fairly basic thing. I thought so.
In today's world.
It is today in today's world. But in that world, it's still, especially pure virgin olive oil, was something that was really expensive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you go to Israel and the West Bank and you go on a tour of the Nazareth village, you'll actually see the olive press.
See some olive presses. That's right. How they did it.
And how you get your different forms of purity of the olive.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Yep. And pure virgin olive oil was obviously very costly. It became so the average person on the street would buy the cheap stuff, which is the third pressed stuff, I think, isn't it?
I think it was. It was one of the final presses.
Yeah, and it's got impurities in it. They would have to use it for normally for the rich they would just use it for lighting, but the poor would have to use that as their basic for their diet as well.
Yep.
But the rich would be the ones who would have the extra. And let's face it, even today, the cost of extra virgin olive oil is expensive today compared to the cheap stuff. And now it's not really any different, is it? Yeah. So I think it's just a statement that's pronouncing there that one of the problems when sin runs its course is the rich get richer and the poor get poorer.
So I'm now just trying to think, is there something deeper in the other ones about...
Well, have a crack. What do you think?
And the first one rode out to win many battles, gain the victory.
Okay, so what's going on there with the first horseman?
Well, there was a crown placed on his head, so that's sort of his authority or
being... So
being
some scholars, not all scholars, some scholars think this might be Jesus, but it doesn't fit to me, only because later on we'll see another white rider on a horse, right?
Yeah.
But it doesn't fit when all the other things that we're about to see, those other 3 horsemen, for instance, and everything else we're going to see is really
the negative
side. So I think what most scholars think is that this is some kind of picture. This is a metaphor. No one's expecting to open the window and see, it's four horsemen riding through the sky. That's not what John's expecting to see here. This is a picture to be a metaphor. No one's expecting to actually see Aslan the lion or, Mr. Tomness, but they all represent things. And what this represents is military victory, this conquering, which is what emperors were known for, conquering. This is a conquering, treading down their enemies, victory at all costs and so on. And, of course, when you do that, what's the result of that? Peace is taken from the earth, which is number 2.
Yeah. Well, I was just thinking then it sort of overlaps with number 2.
That's correct, yeah.
The rider was given a mighty sword and authority to remove peace from the earth, and there was war and slaughter everywhere. So that's sort of like dictatorship.
Yep, exactly. So they can overlap, but they don't always necessarily have to overlap or be in any sequential order. But these are 4 things that happen because of human sin in the world.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. And the 4th one is there was the death.
Yeah. Pale green.
Yeah.
That's that picture of death, isn't it?
Yeah. And to kill with the sword, famine and disease and wild animals, which is that encompasses all death.
Yes, exactly.
So, yeah.
So you can see that what's really happening here is these scrolls are being opened, is things seem to be getting worse, not better.
Yeah.
And I like what N.T. Wright was saying. He's saying it's like if you go to a doctor for a medical condition, or you go to a counsellor or a psychologist for a psychological condition, and you just go in there thinking, hey, I just know let's use the psychology one. Okay, so I just need to talk to this psychologist once, and it's gonna be all okay. I'm going to solve the problem. And the psychologist starts saying, well, what brought you in here today? And starts digging back into your past.
Yeah.
And you go, no, don't worry about the past. That's all in the past. Don't worry about it. I just want to focus on right now. And his point is, no, what we're about to see when this book ends is the end of all things, is the putting right of all wrongs. But just like that, or just like a medical doctor needs to get to the root cause of the problem, what we are seeing in these chapters is the root cause of the problem coming to the surface. So in order for judgment to reach its full measure, sin has to reach its full measure.
Yep.
And we see that. That's what God said to Abraham. He said, it's not right yet. The time has not yet come to judge the Amalekites because the full measure of their sin. And because God is patient with us, he will allow things. And we can often think, why are you waiting so long? We're going to see that with the saints in a minute.
Yep.
Why are you waiting so long, Lord? But he's patient. And so much so that while he's letting sin run its course, he's hopeful that there'll be some who'll repent in the process. Some will, some won't.
Yeah.
Does that sort of make sense? Because that's human nature, isn't it? Really, we see that.
It is. So it definitely makes sense with that one.
Okay.
So let's go on to the 5th seal. Because one thing I did notice was that with these 4 seals, the angel sent the horses out.
Yes.
Or the apocalypse.
The living being, it says.
The living beings sent out the...
kind of released them to go.
Yeah. Gave them the permission to, you've been waiting, now you can go.
Yeah, you can go.
Whereas in the 5th seal, it says, when the Lamb broke the 5th seal, I saw under the altar the souls of all who had been martyred for the word of God and for being faithful in their witness. So it's a different tact. Like it's okay. They're going out. It's like let's turn around and let's look at the throne room of God and let's look at the altar and see what's happening in there.
That's great. That's a good way to put it. Because remember, we've got this scene is heaven and earth combined. Now we're looking at what's happening up there.
Yeah.
Yeah, and what exactly? And it doesn't seem like this is related to judgment, but except, well, I'm not going to cut you off. You go ahead. I'll let you see where you go with it.
I'd say it's not related to judgment because it's as a result of the judgment sort of stuff that's all been happening. Then this opens up.
Yeah.
So it's sort of linked. So yeah.
Yes. Go ahead. Yeah, I think you're onto something.
So it says, I saw under the altar the souls of all who had been martyred for the word of God and for being faithful in their witness. Then called loudly to the Lord, and they called loudly to the Lord and said, O sovereign Lord, so this is those that have been martyred, holy and true, how long will it be before you judge the people who belong to this world for what they have done to us? When will you avenge our blood against these people? So they're asking that question. It's like, well, yeah.
Well, what's just happened is they've just, in the storyline, they've just sat there. They've been martyred for their faith. And they're just expecting the end, and 4 horsemen have just ridden out to make things worse. So that fits the storyline. What?
Yeah.
They're going, when, Lord?
Yeah. It's like, come on,
get on with it.
Yeah. But then it says, then a white robe, in verse 11, white robe was given to each of them, and they were told to rest a little longer until the full number of their brothers and sisters, their fellow servants of Jesus, had been martyred. And I went, okay, white robe, purity, like being cleansed of all their past sins and that. But they were told to rest a little longer until the full number of their brothers have been martyred. I was like, what? There's a number? We've got to wait until a full number of people have been martyred before Jesus fully comes back?
Yeah. It seems like, wouldn't it say, wait until the judgment is complete? Is that what you mean?
Oh, partly. Or I'm just sort of like, it's like, but God says I'm going to return. It does. There's, you don't know the hour or the time that I'm going to return. But then they turn around and say, but until the full fulfillment of these people who've been martyred. So that's sort of a tension. Is like, but Jesus, you say you're coming back now.
Yes.
Returning very soon.
You're returning soon, and yet there's still stuff to be done.
Yeah.
I wonder if we can read too much into that. This is just my thought on it with where I'm sitting at the moment. I am quite comfortable with the fact that this is whether it's a metaphorical picture of the saints, but this is encouragement. And the idea is that ultimately the believers that he's writing to in the 7 churches, those that want to stay faithful, they are potentially suffering persecution, and some have been martyred. Antipas and Pergamon have been martyred. He's specifically named there. So some of them have been martyred. And I think maybe it's just this identification saying, look, there are those up in heaven. You're on earth, but there are those up in heaven that are still waiting too. They're still waiting for the final justification. And they're just told, here, be blessed, have a white robe, but wait patiently because I'm not finished yet. And I think the full number of martyrs, not like God's got a martyr book sitting up there and he's ticking them. I think that's not what he's saying. He's just saying there's going to be more persecution to come. If they read this in the 7 churches, they think, okay, there's more of us yet who are going to have to endure to the point of death. That's kind of the scary bit about it, but also the encouraging bit because, hey, and the same realization that there's still some martyring and persecution to happen, they've now got this vision of a great company crying out for justice, knowing that in the end God's promising he will bring justice.
So just wait, there's more.
There's more. There's more. There's more.
Yeah,
that's
right.
Promises. That's exactly right.
Then John watched as the Lamb broke the 6th seal, and there was a great earthquake. The sun became as dark as a black cloth, and the moon became as red as blood. Then the stars of the sky fell to the earth like great green figs falling from trees shaken by mighty winds. Sky was rolled up like a scroll and taken away, and all the mountains and all the islands disappeared. Then the kings of the earth, the rulers, generals, the wealthy people, hadn't read that one before, or read into that one before.
Yep.
So the wealthy people, the people with great power, and every slave, every free person, all hid themselves in the caves and among the rocks of the mountains. They cried to the mountains and the rocks, fall on us, hide us from the face of the one who sits on the throne and from the wrath of the Lamb. For the great day of their wrath has come, and who will be able to survive? So it's definitely like, wait for the martyrs, wait.
Be patient.
Their judgment is coming. So all those people have done you wrong.
Their day will come.
Their day will come.
Yep. This is rich with Old Testament analogies here. Can you see any of them?
Can't think of where, but I have heard of where they the rocks of the mountains and the caves where people are hiding.
Yep. Is that
but I can't.
Is it Joshua? Is it when the sun stands still around that time? Is that when it is?
Well, I know. No, one of those is I think with Joshua where the rocks come out from the sky and and knock out a lot of people. But I think.
All right. Well, there's actually a few. ChatGPT says there's Isaiah 2:19-21. This passage describes people going into caves and rocks because of the terror of the Lord and the splendor of his majesty when he rises to shake the earth. Hosea 10:8. This verse predicts the high places of sin which Israel worshipped, which will be destroyed, and the people will say to the mountains, cover us, and the hills fall on us.
Yep.
And Luke 23:30 it's worth noting that Jesus quotes still similar imagery when he says, they will say to the mountains, fall on us, and the hills cover us. Jesus is obviously quoting those references in the Old Testament. So it's obviously a parallel. A first century Jew would understand the reference there is to these Old Testament passages when God brings judgment, that those that are being judged try to hide away from that judgment, but they can't get away.
No, I think it's like, why are you trying to hide under rocks and caves when God created the rocks and caves?
That's exactly right. It's like the picture is obviously very vivid though. Like get away from me, that kind of thing. Yeah. And that's isn't it interesting? The kings, the rulers, the generals, like you said, the wealthy. These are clearly this is the wealthy and powerful here. Wealth and power isn't sin in and of itself, but it's very clear in the book of Revelation that the judgment on the wealth and the powerful is that they are elitist and that they are oppressing the poor. That's the problem.
Yes.
Nothing wrong with being wealthy as long as you use it for the kingdom of God. These people were self-focused, and that's anti-kingdom. That's why there's a lot of reference to this in the book of Revelation. One of the big things God's coming against.
Yeah.
So there you go. That's what they're doing as the judgment comes. Also, I think thinking through the Old Testament passages there in this sixth seal, like things like stars falling from the sky. That's another Isaiah imagery for the king of Babylon. You know.
Yes.
Satan. The reference is clearly to Jesus says, "I saw Satan fall like lightning from heaven." Joel, the book of Joel, which Peter quotes on the day of Pentecost, to the Old Testament mind, when they saw when they read of stars falling from heaven, they weren't thinking literal falling stars. When they were talking about the moon turning to blood, like it says in Joel, they weren't thinking about. Although there would have been some portents around when the blood moon, the dark red moons, and all that sort of stuff. They were the natural thing, but that's not what the imagery was using. These things were linked to the day of God's justice and judgment. Yep. They were portents to describe what would happen when God comes back. So it's not like we're looking for this we need to get 4 blood moons in a row and that signifies something. It's not. That's not how they were thinking.
No,
they were just thinking about these symbols. They would use these things they saw all the time. Blood moons are a very common thing. They would use them to reference metaphorically the day of the Lord's judgment.
Well, I just think of back in those days where like the planet Mars was terrifying.
Absolutely, they were terrified. Mars is the god of war for a reason.
Yeah, so it's like those references would be thrown throughout there. It's like, well, that's what the natural world comes back to sort of mean the positive and negatives of this world sort of
exactly.
But,
well, the Jews, ancient Jewish culture, saw the stars as like the gods, the realm of the gods. So when you start seeing stars falling from heaven and shaking of the heavenly bodies, that's very vivid imagery for upheaval in the spirit realm, isn't it? You know, that sort of thing. The gods being judged and all that kind of stuff. And that's just the imagery that's being used here. We don't need to read anything more into it if we understand their culture. They knew very well what that meant. Yeah. This is about God's judgment. It's starting to come upon the earth. Yeah. That's seal number 6, isn't it?
Well, it is. Yes.
Where to from here?
Sort of a small break, which I found interesting.
Mm-hmm.
It's like it's not just sequential seals 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. It's more of like, no, we'll have a little break and then we'll come back to the 7 in a moment.
Okay. So we're going to go on to chapter 7.
Okay, chapter 7 says, Then I saw 4 angels standing at the 4 corners of the earth, holding back the 4 winds from blowing upon the earth. Not a leaf rustled in the trees, and the sea became as smooth as glass. Saw another angel coming from the east, carrying the seals of the living God. So this is different angels than the living beasts and
these are other angels. Yep.
So when I was like, I'd get lost trying to count the number of angels that were in here.
Yeah.
But so another angel was coming, carrying the seal of the living God. He shouted out to those 4 angels who had been given the power to injure the land and the sea, "Wait, don't hurt the land or the sea or the trees until we've placed the seal of God on the foreheads of his servants." And I heard how many were marked with the seal of God. There were 144,000 who were sealed from all the tribes of Israel. And it says Judah, Reuben, Gad, Asher, Naphtali, Manasseh, Simeon, Levi, Issachar, Zebulun, Joseph, and Benjamin. They were all 12,000. It says all the tribes of Israel, but doesn't mention Dan.
Intriguing.
Yeah. Why is that?
I've got some thoughts on it, but I'm interested in you because the way Phil's looking at me, folks, he's got a smile on his face like he's done his study on this. It's interesting it mentions all the tribes of Israel, but then it also mentions Manasseh and it mentions Joseph.
Yes.
Chuck Missler had this right years ago. He said every time there's a difference, every time the list of the tribes is mentioned, they're often mentioned in a different order and usually it's the one missing.
Yes.
So Dan's missing in this instance. Tell me why.
I looked him up. And
Looked up Dan, poor Dan.
Yes. When the two Israel that broke, the kingdom of Israel divided, and you had the northern part of Israel, and then you had Judah, which was the southern part. Dan was associated with telling the tribes to start worshipping other gods.
Okay.
So the idolatry where they set up.
One of the golden calves was in Dan, right up in the north of the country. That's correct.
Yeah.
Yep. We've been there.
Yes.
Did you see it? Were you crippled by that time? The frame around the altar where the altar was, where the golden.
No, I was crippled.
You were crippled by that point. You could walk.
Yeah, that was where it's like, yep, you guys go. I'll just look at the car park.
It was a bit of a hike, that one.
So yeah, Dan was associated with idolatry and apostasy, and sort of like, yeah, let's. So he weren't the one.
So he gets a bad rap in this case.
Yeah, so it wasn't part of the faithful witnesses,
Yeah.
or the faithful who were sealed from God.
Yeah.
So.
Which in itself tells you something, because logically, not every person from that tribe would miss out.
No.
So it would be that way. So we need to see these tribes metaphorically.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll come back to that.
Yeah.
Obviously, at some point, in just a moment.
But also the other thing is, like, when you do read the Old Testament, and it says that the tribes, yes, the tribes got divided, but it says those that from the northern tribes wanted to worship God, they moved south. And those from the southern tribe who didn't want to worship God, they moved north.
That's right.
So
it stands to reason there were still all tribes active in the tribe of Judah, in the kingdom of Judah at that time. That's exactly right. So I think we have this tendency to try to read these. This is some future thing where 12,000 people from each of the Jewish tribes is going to be marked. But we're going to see in a minute. I don't think that's what it's saying. I think this is just a metaphorical thing. Because immediately on, we haven't read it yet, immediately we're going to go on and we're going to see a great company, not just 144,000, we're going to see a great company from every tribe and every tongue and every nation, which is this another way of saying the same thing. This is God's people, not just God's people from Israel, but God's people from everywhere.
So I must admit, just two thoughts, but I always remember I had a lovely couple come knocking on my door, and they were talking about this 144,000. And I said to them...
Did they start with J and end with W?
They did.
Yep, they're big on this.
Yeah, and I said to them, I've already got assurance I'm going to heaven. And the person said, I wish I had that. And I felt really sad for them.
Yeah, because
they believe that that's already
this
gone.
144,000 is
filled. It's been filled.
It's been filled, okay.
So I really felt sad for them. That it was but... so that was a side note.
Yeah.
But... going back to the previous couple of verses where it says the seal of the living God, like why was this angel going around putting the seals on people's head?
So this is an Old Testament reference.
Yeah. It's not Ash Wednesday, is it?
I wonder if Ash Wednesday might have something to do with this reference, the theory of this. But this is actually an Old Testament reference. I think it's the book of, it's either Daniel or Ezekiel off the top of my head. It's Ezekiel. Right. He has a vision of the city and the judgments coming upon Jerusalem, God, because he's seeing the wickedness of the people, the tribes of Israel, the wickedness of the leaders of Israel. So it actually just dawned on me. I'm having the light go off as I'm speaking here. That's why it's going to go on and talk about the tribes of Israel, because this is a reference to Ezekiel's vision. So Ezekiel has this vision of the holy city and God's there, but the glory of God leaves Jerusalem, leaves the temple because of their wickedness and their sin.
Yes.
And then because there's so much wickedness in Jerusalem, Ezekiel's vision, there's this angel, actually says this man holding a writer's case, it says, like some kind of case with a pen or something to mark people. And the angel is about to come through and bring judgment. They're about to pronounce judgment upon the people of Jerusalem for their sin. But before that judgment comes, just the same as these four these 4 angels are being held back.
Yep.
He says, oh, stop. Before you bring judgment, you with the writer's case, you go through and mark everyone in the city who is remorseful about the sin of the people of Israel. And he marks them with a seal on their forehead. And then once they're marked, then he releases the judgment. And the Lord says, now go and bring judgment to anyone who isn't being marked.
Okay.
I think that's exactly what John is repurposing here. He's got that vision in his mind, and this is what's happening. You think about it, the judgment's being withheld until everyone who's believed is marked. And it makes sense then that it would be a reference to Jewish people, because that's what they were. They were Jewish leaders that were marked.
Yeah. Okay.
I think that's what's going on.
Sounds good.
Yeah, I'm not sure where that scripture is. I can't remember. Ezekiel something.
People can look that one up.
You can look that up.
Yep.
Just Google Ezekiel writer's case. That'll bring it up for sure.
Or just read Ezekiel and find it.
Just read all 60, 40, 47, 49 chapters of Ezekiel or something. Yeah. It'll be in there somewhere.
Yeah. After this, I saw a vast crowd, too great to count, from every nation, tribe, people, and language, standing in front of the throne before the Lamb. They were clothed in white, held palm branches in their hands, and they were shouting with a mighty shout, salvation comes from our God on the throne and from the Lamb. That's an amazing scene.
Isn't it?
Yeah. So is this the same crowd would be the same that were under the altar?
It could be, although I think that was specifically talking about those who had been martyred. The presumption here is that not everyone in that crowd is martyred. Some have died in peace, but they've died in the Lord.
Okay.
I think the purpose of that previous chapter, martyrdom, was just to encourage those who are facing persecution. But now you're saying, you might feel like you're alone. You might feel like you're a remnant on the earth in Pergamum, or in Smyrna, where Satan has his throne, or wherever it says. You might feel like there's nobody, but if you can grasp this vision, that there is a great company, thousands upon thousands, 10,000 times 10,000. There's this company that's too great to count, and they are worshipping together. That sort of thing.
Yeah. Well, I must admit, I just realised that I probably should read the whole chapter because it actually references them down a little bit further.
Okay, keep going there.
Yeah. So all the angels were standing around the throne and around the elders and the 4 living beings. They fell down before the throne and worshipped God. They said, Amen, blessing and glory and wisdom, thanksgiving and honour and power and strength belong to our God forever and ever. Amen. Then that's amazing.
Isn't it?
Amazing hymn there.
Beautiful.
One of the 24 elders asked me, who are these who are clothed in white? Where do they come from?
Oh, yes.
And John replies,
you know.
Sir, you are the one who knows. And then that elder says to him, these are the ones coming out of the great tribulation.
Okay, so these are ones from the tribulation, yep.
They washed their robes in the blood of the Lamb and made them white. That is why they are standing in front of the throne of God, serving him day and night in the temple. And he who sits on the throne will live among them and shelter them. They will never again be hungry or thirsty. They will be fully protected from the scorching noontime heat. For the Lamb who stands in front of the throne will be their shepherd. He will lead them to the springs of life-giving water, and God will wipe away all their tears.
Oh, that's so cool. So I'm going to stand corrected on what I just said. It's basically a picture of those who've been martyred, because once again we're trying to encourage the letters, the people in the 7 churches in Asia Minor, because they're suffering or about to suffer persecution. And there's a great company. You're not alone in this. There's a great company, and look what you endure. If you endure to the end, you will be blessed. You will be, what does it say? You'll be fed.
Yes, you'll be fed. You'll be serving.
You'll never be scorched by the heat of the sun.
Never be hungry, thirsty, fully protected.
Yeah. If you kind of feel like you could end there, because this is one of the 7 seals. This is like seal. This is after seal 6, before seal.
Yes, it
is. This is 7 seal. 7.
This is the interim between
6 and 7. So it's like a little pause. We're about to pour out some more judgment, but just before we do, you've seen a lot of bad stuff in seals 1 to 6. Just take a moment. Let's have a look at this. Yeah.
I was actually reading in the Scott McKnight's book. Yep. He sort of says that let's give you all these woes, and we'll give you a little bit of a breather.
Yes.
Pause for a moment to lift up our eyes, to get out of the negativity. Let's look up to the positive. Let's look back up to the throne and see God's still in control.
Sounds like John wants us to have an apocalypse of the eschaton.
Yes, I was like trying to think, now what did you want us to try and remember?
He couldn't remember. He wants us to have an apocalypse of the eschaton. Those in our church will, I'm sure by the end of the series, you will never forget it. I'm going to be badgering you with it. He wants us to have an apocalypse of the eschaton, a vision, an unveiling of the end, of the final victory. Yep.
So persevere.
Persevere, yeah. That's the end of chapter 7.
It is. Let's get into chapter 8. Okay, chapter 8, the seventh seal. So when the Lamb broke the seventh seal, so this is the final seal in the scroll, there was silence throughout heaven for about half an hour. And I saw the 7 angels who stand before God, and they were given 7 trumpets. Then another angel with a gold incense burner came and stood at the altar, and a great quantity of incense was given to him to mix with the prayers of God's people, to be offered on the gold altar before the throne. The smoke of the incense mixed with the prayers of the saints and sent it up to God from the altar where the angel had poured them out. Then the angel filled the incense with fire and from the altar and threw it down upon the earth, and with thunder crashed, lightning flashed, and there was terrible earthquakes. Why was there silence? Why would you?
Good question. Because up until this point, heaven's a noisy place.
Yeah.
There's people shouting and declaring and never crying out day and night, holy, holy, holy. So suddenly there's silence. What happens when you think of silence? If there's silence, is it shock, or is it anticipation?
Could be both.
Could be both. What do you in the narrative? What do you think is about to happen when the seventh seal is cracked? What are you expecting if you're listening to this?
The wrapping up of all things.
Yeah.
The scroll, it's the seventh seal, it's the final.
That's what you're expecting. So I wonder if the silence is related to that. That's my best guess. Is the anticipation. This is it. There's a hushed silence waiting for the end.
Yeah.
And they wait. And they wait.
And there's more.
And they wait. And they're expecting it. And after half an hour, another angel shows up with a gold incense burner.
Oh, it says, I saw the 7 angels who stand before God.
Yep, and they were given
7 trumpets.
So now suddenly there's 7 trumpets. Ah, what? 7 seals? Wasn't that supposed to be it? Now there's 7 trumpets.
So whether it's within the scroll, it says, I'm just thinking the scroll, it's written all out, and it's like part of this 7th seal. Within that is the 7 trumpets.
Yeah.
And the 7 bowls.
Yeah, so some scholars say they kind of overlap each other.
Yeah.
Scott McKnight talks about it as, it might have been in my NT Right reading this week when I was looking at it. He kind of describes it like they're over. We're going to see this with the bowls next week, what are we about to do now? The trumpets. We're going to see it with the bowls next week as well. That they're kind of like the same thing from 3 different perspectives.
Yeah. Okay.
So what you see coming up in the 7 seals, a lot of that is going to be very similar. Basically, it's judgments, it's sin doing its worst, and it's redemption. Going to see that play out in these 7 trumpets as well, in the same way we did 7 seals. So we don't need to see them as sequential. We kind of, I heard a scholar say once, it's like those little Russian dolls.
Yeah.
You know, the little doll inside the doll inside the doll. Think of it like that.
Yeah.
You open it up and there's more inside. That's what's going on here.
I was just thinking like 3D chess set.
Like a 3D chess set. That's another good example of it. Yes. So it's multi-dimensional rather than linear.
Yeah.
This get to 7 seals, then there's 7 trumpets, then get to 7 trumpets, and there's 7 bowls. Don't think of it like, think of it as multi-dimensional, like a 3D chess set or a Russian doll, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we've got this other angel. So there's another angel with a gold incense burner, and was a great quantity of incense was given to him to mix with the prayers of God's people to be offered on the gold altar before the throne.
Interesting.
So God's incorporating the prayers of all these saints, all of God's people who've gone before him and I'm going to make that assumption that it's about those that were in the tribulation and those that have been martyred. So it's
I'm going to make a slightly different assumption. That could be it.
As well as every other Tom, Dick and Harriet who's prayed over the millennium.
Yeah. I think they're all valid assumptions.
Yeah.
I wonder if I'm reading this in Asia Minor in one of those 7 churches, John is telling me, because in the first 7 seals, we've seen all this stuff play out, and pretty much we've got no say in the matter. If you're a first century Christian in one of those 7 churches, you're seeing the judgments play out. You're encouraged by the fact that, hey, there's martyrs up there who've gone before us, and they've laid down their lives, but they're being blessed. Therefore, we can be encouraged to hang out. But really, we've got no choice in the matter. I wonder if now we're being invited into the great cosmic drama, and now we're being told, wow, my prayers today in my church, in my closet time, my prayers come up before God. And we're going to see it. In some way, those prayers affect what's about to happen.
Yeah.
I think it's everybody, but I think I'd take it personally, not just, it's all those prayers of all the other people. No, my prayers matter too.
No, I agree with that one, because it says there in verse 4, it says, smoke of the incense mixed with the prayers of the saints. And if you're Paul, Peter, one of them calls, the church, the people in the church, the saints.
Yes,
so Tradition is sort of called, everybody.
Tradition has said there's only certain people who are saints, but...
Or I was going to say in tradition, some people who've written the Bible, who have translated the Bible, puts, instead of saying the people of God, the saints of God, and sort of it's interchangeable.
Yes.
That's probably...
Yeah, it's more the Catholic Church, and that has created...
Elevated
certain people to sainthood, but that's not how the Bible saw saints. No, every believer is a saint. Yeah, that's right. True.
So your prayers and mixed with and the incense, so the presence of God. So the Bible days, it's like the incense was referring to symbolism of the presence of God in the altar. So the presence of God and your prayers working together.
They all matter. Yeah. Yes, that's right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And this is an Old Testament imagery because the incense altar was right before the Holy of Holies. You know, so they understand this is an Old Testament reference. Yeah. And here we're being told this is the prayers coming up before the Lord. Yep.
And so the angel throws the incense onto the earth where there's a major earthquake. That would be...
It's weird, isn't it?
Yeah.
That their prayers are being thrust down on the earth and bringing bad stuff. What's going on there? What are we supposed to... What is first century... let's pick Ephesus. What's their first century Ephesian Christian supposed to see about, hang on a sec, my prayers are going up before God, but now the angel's taking those prayers and incense burner and throwing it on the earth. And the result is lightning and earthquakes and all kinds of stuff.
I'd say that would go back to the guys who have been martyred, where they're sort of saying, "How long, O Lord?"
Yeah.
When are you going to bring your judgment? When are you going to restore us back to, or restore everything? So those prayers, in the way that they're going to pan out, is through the judgment, but also it's through. We've been told, "Your will be done, Lord."
I think so too.
Jesus taught us to pray, "Your will be done." So it's how often do we pray? Your will be done.
Your will be done. Your kingdom come.
Yeah.
So the end result of God's kingdom coming, of praying that His will be done, is that injustice will be judged.
Yeah.
That's part of God's will. Ultimately, that's what the promise is. That's what we're going to see in the final scene of the book of Revelation, is God righting every wrong, casting the dragon into the pit and overcoming evil. So to play God's kingdom come is not praying God's kingdom come. It's not, "Oh, Lord, bless my house or bless my family." It's, "Lord, put right every wrong." That's a big part of it.
Yeah.
And our prayers matter. This is what Peter says in his writing, 2 Peter 3. He doesn't talk specifically about prayer, but he says this: "Since everything is going to be destroyed, what holy and godly life should you lead, looking forward to the day of God and hurrying it along." So Peter's referencing this final day, this judgment. He's calling it the day of the Lord here, which is what Jews believed would be the day of God's righting every wrong. And it involved redemption and justice against evil. It involved both. It involved both. The same thing we're seeing in these seals is there's justice on the earth for sin and there's redemption and protection for God's people. That's always been encapsulated in the meaning of the day of the Lord.
Yeah.
And Peter is saying, interestingly enough, he's saying the way you live, the way you pray, the way you interact, God uses that somehow to bring about his justice. It's not all just set in concrete. Like God set up in Genesis chapter 2 that humans would partner with him in stewarding the earth on his behalf. And so somehow you and I, as followers of Jesus, the way we conduct our lives, the way we live out, the way we pray, the way we live, is going to have some kind of eternal cosmic effect on seeing God's full redemption come to pass on the earth. And to a person who is facing persecution, feeling obsolete, feeling like the Roman Empire is all encompassing, oh, it's so dark, it's so hard. I hear that all the time. Oh, the days are so dark. I would go, this promise is that you matter.
Yeah.
Don't think you're less than. You're a child of God. You matter. When you pray kingdom come, it actually does make the kingdom come.
So, yeah, extreme Calvinism's out the window with this one.
I think so. Yeah, 100%. Extreme Calvinism, for those that don't know, would be saying that, we're basically pawns on a chessboard and God's just going to have his way 100% and we're not involved.
Yeah.
This is the opposite of that. This is saying you're being invited into the story. You have a part to play. No matter how obsolete, persecuted, unnoticed you feel or seem to be, you matter.
Yeah.
Your prayers are like incense that God will use to pour out on the earth and bring about his justice. I love that. I think you can see why I'm saying I'm getting more excited about the book of Revelation. This is much better than Left Behind.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm written into the story now. It's great.
I'm jokingly.
You've got them all lined up beside you?
Yeah, I've got a bookcase beside me and I've got all the books.
Phil and Kim have the complete collection. Yes, I have most of them somewhere. I think I probably all got them on Kindle now. It's a good read.
Yeah, it's a good read.
It's not a great read. I've read it was probably the earliest Christian fiction I read, and I enjoyed it. But then when I've read some other stuff like the Tainies and stuff, even though I don't necessarily agree with everything they would say about Israel and everything here too, but when I read their stuff, I go, oh mate, these guys write so much better than. Yes. Sorry, Jerry. Jerry Jenkins is a good writer, but
yeah, I would say that's Left Behind. It's totally different. Left Behind was more the dramatics, whereas the Tainies are more the historical.
Yes, historical fiction. Yeah.
Yeah.
I just find some of those others are better writers. But look, if you're interested in just a good, if you're interested in a good read, pick it up and read it. If you're studying the Book of Revelation, full disclosure here, it wouldn't hurt you to read something like Left Behind as well, because if you've never ever been exposed to dispensational theology or the stuff we spoke about at the introduction to episode 1 last week, it wouldn't hurt you to if you feel like a good read. You go on holidays. There's only 13 books or something. It's light reading.
And once you get hooked on it, you just don't put it down.
Well, that's right. You can read through a whole book in a night. It's great. It's a great entertaining read.
Yes, it is.
But once again, I now see that as an entertaining read. I don't see that as theology because this inspires me more.
Yeah.
All right, where are we going? What are we
going
up to?
The first of the 4 trumpets.
Okay, we're into these trumpets. So we've had these 7 seals.
Yep.
There's been silence. We've been expecting the end. And then suddenly there's 7 more angels with 7 trumpets. And here we go again.
So the incense was thrown down to the earth. There's a big earthquake. Then the 7 angels with the 7 trumpets prepared to blow their mighty blasts. The first angel blew his trumpet, and hail and fire mixed with blood were thrown down upon the earth, and 1/3 of the earth was set on fire. 1/3 of the trees were burned, and all the grass was burned. The second angel blew his trumpet. Great mountain of fire was thrown into the sea. 1/3 of the water in the sea became blood, and 1/3 of all things living in the sea died, and 1/3 of all the ships on the sea were destroyed. This is going to be frightening if this all happened in one.
Exactly. And in the Left Behind, it all happens that way.
Yeah.
They take all this literally in the book.
Yeah. Third angel blew his trumpet, and a great flaming star fell out of the sky, burning like a torch. It fell upon 1/3 of the rivers and on the springs of the water. The name of the star was bitterness, or wormwood. It made 1/3 of the water bitter, and many people died because the water was so bitter. Then the fourth angel blew his trumpet, and 1/3 of the sun was struck, 1/3 of the moon, and 1/3 of the stars, and they became dark, and 1/3 of the day was dark, 1/3 of the night also. Lots of thirds.
Lots of thirds.
Yeah. Then I looked up and heard a single eagle crying loudly as it flew through the air, "Terror, terror, terror to all who belong to this world because of what will happen when the last three angels blow the trumpets." So even though those four were horrible, there's still another three to come that are even worse, according to an eagle.
An eagle, yeah.
Yeah. Why did this eagle come out of nowhere? It's like,
I don't know. Do you?
no, I just had that thought. It's like an eagle.
So when these things come up, I mean, Google it and find out. This is a good example. There may or may not be imagery in it, but I suspect that it's got imagery.
Because the eagle is
Well, it's one of the symbols of the representing three of the tribes as they marched, isn't it?
yes, it is. Oh, what did I think I just when we mentioned those, it told me what the eagle divinity. So John, the Gospel of John is referred to.
Ah, yes,
the
yes,
eagle.
the eagle is. Yes, John's Gospel is the divinity. Yep. So there's an announcement from the heavens. Yeah.
For this as an eagle. Which,
Yep. I suspect there's more in it there.
probably, but giving a proclamation of a warning.
Yep. There's definitely a warning
Yeah.
coming.
Yeah.
So there probably is some reference to the Old Testament. I just don't know what it is at the moment off the top of my head.
Yeah, because eagles are soaring up in the
Yes,
Yes,
up
and-
high. Yeah, exactly.
looking over.
Yep.
There.
What do you notice about these plagues, these judgments that come out through these trumpets?
They're destroying the earth, or a third of the earth, like the earth, the land, the sea, the oceans, and the waterways.
Mm-hmm.
So
there is a collective combination. Okay, that's true, and we're going to see some others as well. There's no set order, but some of these particular plagues, do they sound like other things that happen in the book of Exodus? Can you see some of the similarities there?
yes, yeah, to the 10 plagues.
Yeah, to the plagues.
Yep.
Yeah, that's not coincidental. That's intended.
Yeah.
We are supposed to be thinking, this is Exodus.
Yeah.
What does God do before he brings his people, redeems his people out of Egypt?
He sends the plagues.
He allows these plagues to rise, the full judgment of God upon those people. That is what's going on. This is supposed to be telling us there's an Exodus coming. But before the Exodus comes, there will be a judgment to happen upon those that are, that are in that situation, that are facing those challenges.
I hadn't. I probably had read something along those, but I hadn't thought about the Exodus. I had heard about probably the reference to the plagues.
Yes,
but I hadn't thought about before the Exodus, the plagues are coming. So this is a build-up
to an Exodus.
To an Exodus,
exactly.
And yes, because I read the rest of the book.
Yes, there is a great Exodus coming. There's a protection.
Yeah.
God's people are going to be redeemed, and this is actually this is the fulfillment of the Exodus that the original Exodus was pointing to. The original Exodus wasn't the ultimate fulfillment of that. Yeah, so that's intentional.
And then the question is, like, for people who haven't read the rest of it, is like, oh well, and we've been sort of set up that this is the ultimate goal of God redeeming everything. Is like, is God's people going to do what the Israelites did after the Exodus? Are they going to obey God?
Or are they going to go back to Egypt and try and stuff it up again? Yes.
So
good call.
Lots of questions like, are we
Yeah.
going to repeat ourselves, or is this going to be...
And so you're reading this in first century. I'm going to keep saying this because that's who it's written to. First century Asia Minor, you're a Christian there. You're reading this, the question, because this is what Jesus has said to them. Are you going to forsake your first love? Are you going to go back to where you were? You started well, you haven't finished well. I've got this against you. He's kind of drawing them back to you. I brought you through hardship. Now, if you persevere with me, there is a glory, but you've got a choice. You can go back to Egypt if you want to. So this is how the Jewish mind thinks. These metaphors are all intermingled and are supposed to have, like you said, multi-dimensional, multi-layered thinking about them. It's not a one-size fits all. There's one absolute answer. And look, that's a good piece of art. They say, you say the beauty of the art is in the eye of the beholder. You can have three people sit in front of a piece of art and they can see three different things in it if it's a good piece of art.
Yeah.
That's intentional. That's the beauty of artwork.
Yeah.
That's how this should be. It shouldn't be a one-size-fits-all. Just because I see something and it doesn't mean you should see the same.
Yeah, no, I'm just sort of sitting here blown away by the Exodus leading up to,
I can see you're going to do some study on that.
Yeah.
We might even, it might come up as we continue through chapters 8 to 10. It might come up again. I can't recall, but that's being, there's definitely references here because isn't there also water turned to blood? Or does that come later?
That might come later.
That might come in one of the other ones. I don't think we read that one, did we?
No, that comes later. It just says the water becomes bitter.
Oh yeah, 1/3 of the water in the sea became blood. Verse 8.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So there's clearly a reference to the Exodus. Yeah. That one that should alert you to it straight away.
Yeah.
The 1/3 I think is I've looked into what that means because I thought it was pretty significant. I think the general principle of the 1/3. I don't think there's any great meaning. It's significant without being complete. It's partial judgment, but the point is it's a little drip feed because they were expecting the judgment to be finished at seal 7. Now these trumpets are blowing, but the judgment's still not complete because we're still going to have a whole new round in chapter 13, 14 of bowls of plagues and judgment. So it's still not complete.
Yeah.
It's a little drip feed. It's nasty, it's bad, but it still hasn't reached its evil hasn't fully run its course yet.
And I'm just sort of thinking there was also like the hail and fire. That's from the plagues.
That's
era.
Joshua and is it hails in plagues? Yep,
hails because it destroys the
fire's
crops.
not. Is it
not fire falling down? No,
that's Sodom and Gomorrah judgment.
Yeah,
and it's also It's also in the book of Joshua where the hailstones. No, it's hail again, isn't it?
Hail.
Yep.
But possibly I guess there's trees and grass were burned, but it does like I'm just thinking of with all the crops were all destroyed and
that happened.
Yeah.
Yep, that's right. This is all Egypt plague stuff. There's third of the day was dark.
it was
a third of the day was dark. I mean, what does that mean? It could mean a third of the day period turned dark, like the day was extended. But once again, darkness was one of the plagues.
Yeah, for 3 days. Darkness was there for 3 days.
So we are definitely supposed to think Exodus story here.
Yeah. Unable to drink the water. So it's amazing.
So we're going to go on to chapter 9.
Okay, chapter 9. The fifth angel blew his trumpet, and I saw a star that had fallen to earth from the sky, and he was given the key to the shaft of the bottomless pit. When he opened it, smoke poured out as though from a huge furnace.
So this is the first time we've seen this reference to the pit. It'll carry on for some time in the rest of the book now, but this is it. Yep.
Smoke poured out as though from a huge furnace, and sunlight and the air was darkened by the smoke. This star, is this actually Satan or not? But I'm probably jumping ahead. Why don't we read the rest of it?
Sure.
Because then locusts came from the smoke and descended on the earth, and they were given power to sting like scorpions. They were told not to hurt the grass or the plants or trees, but to attack all the people who did not have the seal of God on their foreheads. They were told not to kill them, but to torture them for 5 months with agony like the pain of scorpion stings. In those days, people will seek death, but will not find it. They will long to die, but death will flee away. The locusts look like horses armed for battle. They had gold crowns on their heads, had human faces. Their hair was long like the hair of a woman, and their teeth were like the teeth of a lion. They wore armor made of iron, and their wings roared like an army of chariots rushing into battle. They had tails that stung like scorpions, with power to torture people. The power was given to them for 5 months. The king is the angel from the bottomless pit. His name is in Hebrew is Abaddon, in Greek Apollyon, the destroyer. The first terror has passed, but look, 2 more terrors are coming.
Oh, aren't you excited? So much to look forward to. It's terrible. There's terrors.
Yeah, I must admit I was starting to giggle in my mind because it's like, They got human faces and hair like the hair of women and the teeth
like a lion.
And
This, you've heard the thing, no doubt, that these locusts are a reference to like Apache helicopters. Have you heard that? Yeah,
yes.
Military aircraft or something like that. That's what people who are trying to predict, futurists are trying to do, trying to predict that this is what that is. But once again, we're using apocalyptic literature. We're using a genre that's supposed to be vivid, word pictures, etc. I mean, these are ugly dudes.
Yeah. And now I've lost that whereas, so this is things, but first one, it says, I saw a star that had fallen to earth from the sky and he was given the key to this shaft of the bottomless pit. So would that be a reference to Satan because he was the fallen star, or is this a reference to Jesus? Because the reason why is like down in verse 11, it says their king is like from the king of this the locust is the angel from the bottomless pit. His name is in Hebrew is Abaddon, the Apollyon, the destroyer. I say that is more like the king from the bottomless pit is a reference more to Satan because that's where he's going and all that.
That's how I read it.
Yeah.
But
So-
you're saying is the first part also Satan, the star that fell?
The question is because most people, like Christians over the years, have said the star, a fallen star, is a reference to Satan.
Yeah. Well, that's how I read it.
Yeah. But he's been given the keys to the bottomless pit.
Okay. Let's
it's saying-
unpack that analogy a little bit. See if this works. I'm just doing this in real time, folks. Let's start with a star has fallen from heaven to earth. To me, there's a direct reference there to Isaiah 14, is it? Ezekiel 28. I always get them mixed up. Oh, how you have fallen, O morning star, son of the dawn. And it's definitely speaking. It's first of all, I think it's the king of Tyre. So it's speaking first of all about an earthly king, but then as the poetic language goes on in the prophecy, you see he's not just talking about an earthly king. He's now talking about the spiritual force that animates that earthly king and gives it its power. And that's the serpent. That's the devil. That's Satan. The accuser. I think you're supposed to load that up into this. So here, okay. So when you see a star falling from earth to the sky, you're not thinking about that being anybody but Satan.
Right.
Plus, by this time, they will have also known of Jesus' writing where he said, I saw Satan fall like lightning from heaven. So they would have that in mind. So let's assume, for the sake of it, that is Satan. So your next question is, well, why is he given the key to the bottomless pit?
Yeah.
When Jesus is the one who'll say, I hold the keys of death and Hades.
Yeah.
I wonder if it's just in the context of this chapter, of this vision, the point is this one who has fallen from heaven to earth now has access to all of the ugliness that comes out of the pit, the evil in the pit. He can come and go as he pleases from the pit. Because later on, we're going to hear that he's locked back into the pit, and that's going to come later. But right now, he has the key. In the context of the story, he can come and go as he wants from this pit. He's the one who has the power to go down there and release these locust-like beings from the pit who are going to bring this horrible pain and torture upon the earth. So I think in the context of it, you're supposed to see that Satan has a degree of authority over the pit at this point in the story. And that's the tension that's building in the story, because later on, he's going to have that authority taken away from him.
Yeah.
But even the fact that it says he has been given the key, not that he's stolen it. This is in the divine will of God. Remember, the judgments are happening because God is letting the sin run its course, letting it do its worst so that he can rightfully judge it at its worst. Yep. Like we said about the doctor who needs to get down deep into the wound, or the counselor needs to get down to the bad stuff so that he can rightfully put it right. I think that's what's going on here. And a part of that is Satan thinks he's running his own race, but no, you've been given the key and ultimately you're serving God's purpose. But right now in the story, you have access to do what you will. That's how I read it.
Yeah, I can read it like that now. But then my brain says, well, why doesn't he just open up the key anyway? Like, why is he waiting until this point? Like, why hasn't Satan been, open up the doors
earlier on
to really wreak havoc?
How about we just you're still thinking sequentially.
Yes, I am.
That's the thing. We're not thinking this happened, this happened, this happened. This is just something that's describing what has always happened.
Yep.
Throughout the history of humanity, locusts have always run their course. You know, evil is running its course and has been running its course.
Yep.
So yes, in the play itself, it's sequential in the story, but that does not mean it automatically transfers into a sequential sequence in real life. It's all happening. It's like a parody of life.
Yep.
That's how we're supposed to see it.
Yep. That's a good reminder because I'm
still thinking through that the dispensationalism. Yeah, it's taking me a while, and I think I'm even getting it more just sitting down with you again today. I'm starting to find it more natural now to think non-dispensationally. I think even a week ago when we sat down and did our first episode, I was still trying to learn to do that. But in the course of, I've done a lot of study in the last week, and I'm now starting to feel like I can do this. This is actually quite good. I can now see this a different way, more naturally, without having to wrestle with it as much as I used to.
Yeah, good. Okay, let's get into the sixth trumpet.
Okay. What verse are we on?
Verse 13.
13, okay.
The sixth angel blew his trumpet, and I heard a voice speaking from the four horns of the gold altar and the stands that stands in the presence of God. The voice spoke to the sixth angel who held the trumpet, release the four angels who are bound at the great Euphrates River. And the four angels who had been prepared for this hour and day and month and year were turned loose to kill 1/3 of all the people on earth. They led an army of 200 million mounted troops. I heard an announcement of how many there were. I must say, I feel sorry for these angels who they had been prepared just for this hour, this day and month and year.
They've been waiting a long time. That takes me back to I don't even remember who it was. So if you're listening to this, and it's a long time ago, so you won't be listening to this. But we had an issue at our last church at Mount Anna, the letterbox right down the bottom of the property, the PO Box 347 or whatever it was, and a couple of times in a row it got bombed. Letterbox had got bombed or something because it's a long way from the church. Dear lady in the church, I have no idea what her name was. I just remember the story. She said, "We need to pray, Pastor Rohan. We need to pray that God stations an angel to protect that letterbox." And trying to just nod politely, I'm thinking to myself, what does the poor angel have to have done to get stuck on letterbox duty? It's a little bit like what you're talking about here. So we got one job. I'm looking after the letterbox. Oh dear. She meant well.
Well, I must admit, when we, finally, when the new earth, new creation, we all get given jobs to do.
We'll have jobs to do.
So we might get one of those.
duty. That's right. Exactly.
A reward in heaven is to guard the letterbox.
Exactly. I'm on letterbox duty. Better to be a letterbox keeper in the house of the Lord than flourish in the courts of the wicked. Yes. So, okay, what are you picking up out of this then? What's going on in this story, in this vision? What are they supposed to pick up out of it?
Release the four angels from bound at the Euphrates rivers and to kill 1/3 of all the people on the earth. So
we've got 1/3 again, so we've got this reference to partial judgment.
Yeah. An army of 200 million mounted troops. I heard an announcement of how many there were.
That's a lot, by the way. I wonder if the Euphrates... Here's my thinking on this. The Roman Empire is coming up. This is targeting... This is a parody for the Christians who are under Roman occupation, Roman rule, Roman persecution. The Roman Empire's biggest threat in that time, in the middle of its affluence and power, at that time, especially in Turkey, where they're over in the east part of the Roman Empire, their threat is from those that are not part of the Roman Empire, that are coming from further east. Now, they've already defeated by this stage, the Romans have defeated what was their arch enemy, which were the Carthagins from Carthage in Africa. They were like the prime Hannibal and all that sort of stuff, and he rode elephants across the Alps and all this sort of stuff. They had defeated them, I think, 300 years before that. So the Romans now are pretty stable. They think they're very stable. It doesn't take very long for the Roman Empire to fall apart. But to the mindset of the Romans in Turkey at the time, their concern was that there would be an enemy coming from the east that would try to overrun them. Because if they were going to come through from the Persian Empire and that sort of part, Turkey was... and they were on their way to Rome.
Yep.
They're coming through Turkey.
Yep.
So I wonder if this is a picture of, this is supposed to go, you know what, you think you're stable, but you're not the top of the tree. There is judgment coming. You know, I think that's what a little bit about what's going on here, that it's letting them know that there's an enemy coming to get them, to bring judgment on them. Release the 4 angels that are bound, holding back this enemy army. Now, that never eventuated, interestingly enough. There was no attack that I'm aware of that came to Rome from that. Well, there was, but 600 years later, the Muslims came through to hit the Byzantine Empire. But that's 600 years after this that came through from that direction. Prior to that, though.
So no real major overthrow, like totally domineering. Sort of like, I'm just thinking like the Greeks and then the Romans. It's like.
The Roman Empire never fell that way.
Yeah.
The Roman Empire imploded from the inside. It became a Christian empire, pseudo-Christian, and I do that in air quotes. But it imploded from the Western Roman Empire fell in about 400 or 500 AD. The Eastern Roman Empire, the Byzantine Empire, which they didn't call themselves the Byzantine. We call them the Byzantines. They call themselves the Romans. They lasted till 1453. Basically, the Roman Empire in the East lasted another 1,000 years until they were defeated by the Ottomans. Then brought in the Ottoman Empire. But yeah, there was no. Unlike when the Babylonians were overthrown by the Medes and the Persians, and the Babylonians overthrew the Assyrians, and then the Medes and the Persians, and then the Greeks, and then the Romans. No, there was no great world power.
Yeah.
The Western Roman Empire largely got attacked from the north by the Visigoths, and it just imploded. And then ultimately, I guess you could argue that the only world power that finally kicked the Romans off was the Turks.
Yeah.
Was the Muslims. I don't think it was the Turks, but instituting the Ottoman Empire, which is what we talked about in our Israel Gaza podcast. Is it that's the longest Israel was under Ottoman rule for 500 years, which is the longest time anywhere. Yeah. That's probably the closest, but not in the way that you'd seen these multiple kingdoms toppling other ones time after time over the space of 300 years, 400 years. There's like multiple kingdoms, none of that.
Yeah.
For Rome. But I don't think that escapes the picture here. This is supposed to be a vivid picture. They're living under fear or threat of an enemy that's coming to get them.
Which is probably constant.
Which is a constant thing. We think you think you're stable and you've got it all together and you're rich and you're powerful. This is God's way of saying, don't trust in your riches.
Yeah. Build your foundation on solid ground.
Yes, that's right.
So verse 17. Spencer, build your life on solid ground. Yes, you preach it. In verse 17, it says, in my vision I saw the horses and the riders sitting on them. The riders wore armour that was fiery red, sky blue and yellow. The horses' heads were like the heads of lions, and fire and smoke and burning sulphur billowed from their mouths. 1/3 of all the people on earth were killed by these 3 plagues, by the fire and the smoke and the burning sulphur that came from the mouths of the horses. The powers was in their mouths, but also in their tails, and their tails had heads like snakes and the power to injure people. But the people who did not die in these plagues still refused to turn from their evil deeds. They continued to worship demons and idols made of gold, silver, bronze, stone and wood, idols that neither see nor hear nor walk. And they did not repent of their murders or their witchcraft or their immorality or their thefts.
So under all this judgment, the bulk of people still not repenting.
No. Which is really sad when it's like presented to you. Here's a way out.
Yeah.
Just come and take it.
Yep.
It's a free gift, but you still want to deny it.
Yep.
Like just don't want to listen to it.
That's right. Yeah, or refuse.
Yeah.
Or refuse to listen to it. Yeah. People will say, I don't believe in God, I hate God, all that kind of stuff. That's what it's kind of referring to here.
Yeah.
And this is still 1/3. Is this the second time that 1/3 of the people have been referenced as being killed?
Oh, yes.
So this is now 1/3 of 1/3. So you can see here we're not talking about, 1/3 of people have died. This is 1/3 of the remaining 2/3. That's how you kind of have to read it. But that's not, it's just vivid imagery.
Yeah.
Significant but partial. This is the tension here. In one hand, this is in heaven, they're blowing the trumpets. But you're also seeing that this is Satan and the kingdom of darkness at work in the world. This is not God causing so much as God allowing humanity under its willing surrender to the enemy, to the dark spiritual powers, to do its worst upon the earth. And this is what happens. Destruction happens. That's why back in the book of Genesis it says, God says, I will not allow them to live forever. Their days will be 120.
Yep.
Why? Because if you read the narrative of Genesis, they're living long lives. They just got worse and worse and worse. That's what God's. It's His grace. It's His grace that He's compassionate and He's long standing, but it's also His grace that He doesn't let it go on forever. Because we just get worse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just had a thought is like how this book of Revelation it's all intertwined and not sequential sort of thing. It's having a look into heaven and all these judgments are coming through. It's like God is outside of time.
Yes.
Us humans are so used to being time
bound
and linear and from point A to point B.
It's the only way we exist this time. Linear, isn't it?
But God is outside of time, and so from the beginning to the end is all mixed in one sense.
It's all happening in an eternal presence, if you like. So probably the best way our minds can handle it is it's all happening at once. Yeah.
So having all these trumpets and stuff blown and third of the world's third of a third of a third, it's like, well, yeah, it's all happening at the same time because God's outside of time.
It's all happening at the same time and it's all happening all the time.
Yeah.
I think maybe that's a better way to put it than it's all happening at one time. It's all happening all the time. Because why I'm saying that is because then we can read this as this is a parody. This is a visual description, a revelation, an apocalypse of what is happening all the time in the titanic cosmic battle between good and evil.
Yeah.
I like that. Yeah. It's good, Phil.
It is. Because I sort of was thinking...
You like that too, Spencer, because you're making a lot of noise right now.
Because I was sort of thinking like, well, God already knows what we're going to pray. So He's already answered our prayers.
Yeah, exactly. He's not time-bound.
And so He's outside of that time. So He's already predestined what our choices.
Yep.
Not predestined, our choices is probably what we're going to choose.
Yep. Yeah.
And so He already knows who's going to be saved, who's not going to be saved by our choices.
Yep.
But we still have to make those choices.
We still have to make the choices. That's right. That's where the whole predestination thing comes in. God's still giving us free will, but He's also knows our choices, so He can orchestrate things on the earth to fit the choice that He knows we will make given the opportunity to make the choice. Yeah.
Which is twisting our minds.
It is twisting. It's beyond us. That's where Paul goes, the depth and riches and wonders of God, they're beyond our comprehension. Absolutely they are. Yeah. We've got one chapter to go, have we?
We do.
All right. Chapter 10.
Let's go. Okay, last chapter for today, chapter 10. It says, Then I saw another mighty angel coming down from heaven. This is a mighty angel.
This one's a mighty angel, strong angel.
Compared to the other ones. Just angels.
Yep.
Coming down from heaven, surrounded by a cloud with a rainbow over his head. His face shone like the sun and his feet were like pillars of fire. Is this Jesus?
I wonder.
Yeah.
There's something different about this angel, isn't it? Because this is certainly you're supposed to be thinking, if not Jesus, this angel is like a direct representative of Jesus because the reference to the sun, and this is all what John saw in the original vision, isn't it? Yeah.
And in his hand was a small scroll which he had unrolled.
Oh, hello.
He had unrolled the scroll before.
Ooh, and it was open.
Down. Yeah.
Maybe this is Jesus. Maybe you're supposed to think this is Jesus because this is like a small scroll. Well, the other scroll's been unraveled now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the other one was a small scroll.
Was it a small scroll, the other one with 7 seals?
I'm thinking I'm jumping ahead because they've eaten the small scroll, which is what
that's this one. Yeah, I don't think, but I wonder if there's definitely a link. I think that I read this as, okay, Jesus has opened the scroll.
Yeah.
And once again, like in the same way our prayers count, I reckon if we read this through that lens of somehow we are now being invited into the final unraveling. Yeah. We're being invited back into the story, I think. I wonder, let's just see.
Yeah. Well, back in chapter 5, it says, I saw a scroll in the right hand.
Not a small scroll. One. But it has to be small to fit in John's hand, probably. That's the analogy.
Yeah. So had a small scroll which he had unrolled. He stood with his right foot on the sea, his left foot on the land. He gave a great shout like the roar of a lion. And when he shouted, the seven thunders answered. Seven thunders. Haven't had the thunders actually answering. I don't think. It's just saying that it thundered and
yeah, that's right. I was about to say they made a noise and he said, right, yes, okay, no, I haven't seen that.
So this is
this angel has got his foot on the land and sea. So that's once again that's a sign of dominion over heaven, over
all the earth,
including the sea, which is obviously that tumultuous, chaotic thing. The sea is the picture of the beast. We're going to see the beast come out in the next episode, come out of the sea, because the sea in Genesis 1 represents chaos. God ordered the land out of the sea. So he's saying, I'm standing over everything. I have authority over the land and over this chaotic ocean.
So when the seven thunders spoke, I was about to write, but a voice from heaven called to me, keep secret what the seven thunders said. Do not write it down.
So we don't know.
No. I'll have to get to heaven and ask.
Have to find out.
Yeah.
Paul had something similar in 2 Corinthians. He said, I was caught up to the third heaven and heard things that no human is allowed to write or allowed to say or something like that. Yeah. Wonder if it's similar to that.
Yeah. So does it mean that the Bible's not finished?
No, that's. I wonder if it means that the story can continue. Even into the new creation, the story continues. Oh, you know what? I was thinking about this week. I love this scene from The Lord of the Rings when they're sitting in Minas Tirith and there's Pippin and Gandalf sitting there, and Pippin says, I didn't think it would end this way. And Gandalf turns to him and says, end? No, it doesn't end like this. And it's a Revelation story. He says, oh, you know, the sky will go dark and then the light will be peered back and then you just see endless fields as long as you go on. And the story continues kind of thing. And Pippin says, that doesn't sound so bad. He goes, no, it's not too bad at all. Yeah. It's a great scene. I wonder if that's a little bit like we're being invited into the end is the end is a new beginning. It's the story continues. It's beautiful. It's hope-filled.
Also just reminded of the end of, I would say, the Narnia Chronicles.
Yeah, exactly. That's probably even more accurate to this. Yeah.
So if you read...
What does Aslan say at the end? He walks off into the distance, doesn't he? It says, something like, come follow me or something. Can't remember.
I can't remember.
Yeah.
It's been a while. But I just sort of think like, it just, the story continues. They go on into go meet Aslan and be like up there. With
the story goes on. Yeah. That sounds a whole lot better than floating around on clouds playing harps, to be honest.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, I think it's richer than that. Oh, I long for that day. I actually think the story's richer than that. God's inviting us into a glorious, eternal future story. Yeah.
Verse 5, then the mighty angel standing on the sea and on the land lifted his right hand to heaven, and he swore an oath in the name of the one who lives forever and ever, who created heaven and everything in it, the earth and everything in it, the sea, everything in it. He said, God will wait no longer, but when the seventh angel blows his trumpet, God's mysterious plan will be fulfilled. It will happen just as he announced it to his servants, the prophets.
Okay, so we've had the seven seals. We've been waiting. Oh, okay, it's the seven trumpets. When that happens, the end will come. Stay tuned.
It will be fulfilled, yes, just as it was announced by the servants. So then the voice from heaven called to me again, go, take the unrolled scroll from the angel who was standing on the sea and on the land. So I approached him and asked him to give me the little scroll. Yes, take it and eat it, he said. At first it will taste like honey, but when you swallow it, it will make your stomach sour. So I took the little scroll from the hands of the angel and I ate it. It was sweet in my stomach, but it made my stomach sour. Then he said to me, you must prophesy again about many peoples, nations, languages, and kings. This angel lifted his right hand to heaven, swore an oath to God, saying God will wait no longer. It will happen just as the prophets announced it. So it's like God doesn't do anything without
telling his prophets. Yes, they're involved. Yeah, good. Once again, it's the partnership arrangement between humans and God. Yep, great.
So he's not high, lofty and up there and left us to our own devices. He wants to work in partnership with us.
That's great.
Is great.
And that's good for these first century guys who feel obsolete and insecure and persecuted, isn't it? That, hey, we've already said he's had what have we had before? And we've had the prayers. You've been involved in the prayers. We've had the whole concept of we're partnering with you. We're inviting you. God's inviting us into that, the fulfillment of his plan.
Yeah.
And he's doing it again here.
Yeah.
He's inviting John to partake of this scroll. This thing that's been unsealed in heaven, like a mini version of that now, is being given to John. Here, you're part of this.
Yeah. Stand amazed at that one. It's like part of God's kingdom and working with it. And he says there, it's like take and eat, though ingest the prophecy. You become one with it. So
you eat something, it becomes you, doesn't it?
Yeah.
You are what you eat.
So our Christian life is to get into the Word of God, to find out, to have it infused so much into us that it becomes second nature.
Becomes who we are and then comes out of us because it's in us. Yeah. As a preacher, I know that. I know how much easier it is to preach a sermon that is in me rather than something that I haven't taken the time. If I'm just regurgitating something that I haven't got a revelation of, that I haven't owned, I haven't pursued and made it part of me, it's empty. Yeah. It's so much better when you get a revelation and you go, oh, this is personal now. I own this. It's much easier to share that, and that's what's happening here.
You have confidence in
you're
what
living
you say.
it.
Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah,
and this, it's a strange analogy. This eating a scroll. You don't eat scrolls. So it's
one way to eat the word of God.
That's right. Exactly. That's exactly the metaphor, isn't it? Yeah. It's not you don't think of eating scroll, but if you see that the metaphor is God's divine word or God's divine plan. And then you go, okay, mix the metaphors. We eat the bread of life, God's word. Man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word. So Jesus is quite comfortable to take Deuteronomy there and say, okay, well, you do eat God's word. It becomes part of you. So that's a mixing of metaphors. Because this is Ezekiel chapter 2.
2 and 3.
2 and 3, where God tells him to eat the scroll. And this is clearly what John's riffing off here. Same in the vision. This is the same thing that happened to him that happened to Ezekiel, isn't it?
Yeah. Ezekiel's get told, eat the scroll and then prophesy.
Yep.
What he was told to prophesy.
And it starts sweet and becomes bitter.
Yeah. Whereas Ezekiel's message wasn't sweet at all. It was just bitter.
No, right.
Judgment. But
I don't know about that. Well, it's both. Yeah. I think it's both. I think even Ezekiel's word, there's plenty of promise in Ezekiel too. I think the two go hand in hand. I think this is what we're picking up at. I'm getting this out of our conversation today about Revelation, is that judgment and restitution, or judgment and protection, provision, redemption go hand in hand all the way through. And they did for Ezekiel too. He's pronouncing judgment upon God's people, but also promising them future redemption, or redemption to those who will listen and stay the course and repent. Yeah. And I think you can't have one without the other. Maybe that's where we in the Western Church are sadly lacking. We want to have the redemption without the repentance, without the judgment of God. But the fact that evil has to run its course on the earth means that sometimes we'll be caught up in that. We'll be caught up in the result of evil running its course, such as persecution and misunderstanding and evil and sickness and all those other things that happen, but stay the course. Yeah. Anything else you got there?
Probably the only last point is with this is he's told to prophesy again to many people, nations, languages, and kings. So it's to everybody. So it's not just a singular type of people.
Yes, not just one. It's back to the multitude. Yeah. I think it's Ezekiel that has this vision where he's told to prophesy to the king of Tyre, and he's prophesied to the king of Edom and the king of Moab. And I don't think the way I read that vision is he didn't go around and knock on the door of the king of all these countries and say, oh, by the way, God says this to you. Yeah. One, he probably would have lost his head if he'd done that. But two, he was limited in where he could go. But the point was, prophetically, he was prophesying to them. In the spirit realm, he would declare over them, you have treated Israel badly, this will happen to you. And I wonder if it's the same here. It's like God's saying to John, you just need to keep speaking. And he's saying to us, you just need to keep, wherever you go, wherever you're around, live out this gospel life. Faithfully live out this gospel. And sometimes it'll be sour in your stomach. It won't be easy. Yeah. It's not promising that it's always going to be sweet. But if you stay the course, in the end, it will be very, very sweet.
And I was just thinking, it's like where you said Ezekiel didn't go up and knock on the king's door. It's like, well, we're told in Scripture to pray for our leaders.
Yes.
Yep. Pray for those in authority. Well, I don't know, many of us have actually gone up to our Prime Minister and knocked on the door of the lodge and sort of said, hello, I'm praying for you.
But in some way, we have a part to play.
Yeah.
That's great, Phil. Yeah, we are written into this story. This is encouraging us today to write. Our prayers matter, our actions matter, our declarations prophetically matter.
Yeah.
God will use it all for good, for our good, for the good of the world, and also to bring about his plan and justice on the earth. All right,
That's
then.
awesome.
That's great. Well, thank you, Phil. We'll get you back. I'm sure we'll get you back another time in a month or two for another episode. We'll be finished with the book of Revelation by the time we get you back. But
Yes, have somebody else's perspective. Or another
yeah.
people's,
Well, thank
which
you
would be
for
good.
being with us to kick off these first couple of episodes.
It's been good.
Yeah.
Appreciated it.
No worries, and we'll see you all next time.
Yeah, see you later.
Thanks.
Bye.